Hi folks, just a content warning before we start. This episode has mentions of climate anxiety, mental health and eating disorders. If you're impacted at all with anything in this chat, please do see some links in the description. Thank you. Welcome to Coffee and Geography, where my guests and I geek out about the world and everything on it, discovering that we are all geographers in some way, shape or form. I am your host, Kit, and my pronouns are they, them or she, her. So settle down with a brew, hit that subscribe or follow button, and enjoy the listen.
This podcast is sponsored by the World Energy and Meteorology Council, or WEMC for short. WEMC is an international organisation focused on weather and climate data to support energy transition, and we also work with educators. WEMC have created Teal, an easy-to-use free visualisation tool that enables you to explore climate variables for the past 70 plus years. Get started at tealtool.earth. Find us at wemcouncil.org and follow us on Twitter at wemcouncil.
Hi everybody and welcome to Coffee and Geography, and today I've got a double special helping for you because I'm joined by two wonderful guests. I'm joined by Caroline and Rebecca. Good evening to you both.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So, because I've got both two of you here, rather than everybody droning with my voice, droning around, let's get you to introduce yourselves. So let's start with Caroline. Caroline, please introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Caroline Fernandez, and I'm a coordinator of a project called Sustain, which part of it is working with the UEA on climate anxiety.
Yeah, so UEA is the University of East Anglia. And that's you've heard that a lot, folks, because you know that that's where I work. And I've got a lot of connections with. And you say here that you are a food grower, an environmentalist, and chirpy ex-Londoner living in Norfolk.
yeah, that's true.
So a bit like me then. Yeah, I'm from Harlow in Essex, but my dad's from the east end of London, so I'm kind of like Cockney Essex hybrid. I don't know if that's good or bad. So yeah, and Caroline is the eldest of 8 siblings and loves to travel the world through food, loves speaking German, and has family in India. We thank you, Caroline. Rebecca, please do introduce yourself.
Wow, I didn't know that about you, Caroline. Eldest of 8. Wow. So I'm Rebecca Nestor, and I'm with the Climate Psychology Alliance, and we do a lot of work on climate anxiety and generally on the psychology, the social psychology of people's responses to the climate and ecological crisis. And I lead for the CPA on climate cafes, which is one of the things we do to support people with climate anxiety, but also to kind of normalise talking about the climate crisis.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about those climate cafe stuff. But it also says here, you did miss one thing out. And it says here that you live in Oxford and you regularly splash around in the Thames.
Oh, I do. I mean, it's filthy, of course, but we have just got bathing status for the bit of the Thames that I swim in, which is essentially meaningless as far as I can tell. It means that there'll be some monitoring of it for the next 10 years, and then maybe they might start making it cleaner, possibly. Who knows?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if people say about the Thames, the first thing that doesn't come to mind is swimming in it.
But it's cleaner in Oxfordshire than it is in London, isn't it?
Yeah, cleaner and smaller. Yeah, it is. It is a lovely thing to swim in. You just have to not think about what might be in it. It is absolutely glorious. Birds and geese and ducks and other swimmers and rowers and people fishing. It's a massive community, really.
Oh, nice. I used to live on the Thames in Berkshire as well, so I didn't really swim in it that much. I've only really got into swimming the last couple of years. But I swim in the River Bure and the River Waveney and the sea.
Yeah, the River Waveney. River Waveney, just a stone's throw from my house right here in South Norfolk, and it's the closest I've been to the Thames in terms of getting my feet wet was the little when the tidal bit of the Thames and the tide's out and they got the beaches you just can go down those kind of like ladders and just kind of like paddle on the beach, do things like that. And then as you see the river start rising again, right, that's it, back up there, get your feet. So I just remember my dad going, "Don't touch the water."
Yeah.
And what on earth is being washed up onto those little beaches as well in London?
Yeah, let's not think about that. So yeah, that's lovely that we've got that thing in common. I mean, with the River Thames there, it's amazing how something like a physical feature like a river can actually connect people in such a way. And for one thing, I've been talking to so many guests now. One thing that I realised that, and we'll come to this a bit later, no doubt, we'll talk about climate anxiety and whatnot, is how the human society and our cultures are just becoming more disconnected to nature, and we're connections through things like we're doing right now, like through digital screens, rather than connections through a river or through a mountain range, and it seems a bit of a shame.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to go to, do you two have a drink with you this evening? Because I know it's quite late and some people don't usually have a drink with them, but we usually talk about our brews, and if you have something with you, or what your usual tipple is that just water then, Rebecca?
It's water with a bit of lemon juice squeezed into it, and it's in a Cambridge Folk Festival mug or beer glass from 1997, which is probably before you two were born.
No. I would have been in year 10 in 1997. So I would have been 14, 15. What about yourself, Caroline?
I would have been older than that.
I was actually referring to if you got a drink with you. You
right. I finished my drink, but I had this time of the evening I drink fresh mint and lemon balm from my garden.
Nice.
Yeah, good mix. Just a few sprigs of mint, some lemon balm, and hot water. It's very nice.
There is something funny going on. You see, this is the third chat out of the last 4 where mint has been drunk. So that's just bizarrely coincidence. This is you folks are well, let me think, 51st or something conversation I've had, but 3 of the last 4 they've all mentioned something to do with mint. So that's another coincidence. Yeah, Shanique Harris talked about, because she has family in Jamaica, she says every time she goes to see her family in Jamaica, she brings over a stash of mint from Jamaica, so like this really kind of strong Jamaican mint. And who was the other person? And I think it was Esther a couple of episodes ago, my friend Esther, who also lives in Norfolk. She says, yeah, she loves getting fresh mint tea and just from the garden and brewing it up as well. So it's mint season.
That makes me realise that my mint hasn't arrived yet this year. That must be because of the kind of weird kind of up and down weather we've been having with no water for ages and ages and ages, and then these deluges. I'm going to go.
It has been exceptionally dry.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether the mint is hiding somewhere else. I'm going to go and have a look when we're finished.
Nice little saunter into the garden, and you can have a look for some slugs and snails while you're out there as well.
That won't be difficult.
Yeah, it really has been a strange. I mean, what is strange anymore when it comes to the weather and the climate? I mean, yesterday, for example, with my personal weather station, I know it's not an official gauge of temperature because it's a personal weather station, but my thermometer outside registered. Sorry, not yesterday, the day before yesterday, 33.6 degrees Celsius. That is, just off the top of my head, 92 degrees Fahrenheit for any folks who work in Fahrenheit. That was too much for me. That
was very hot, wasn't it, that day, Friday? Yes. It was 31 in the shade. And it was 50 in my conservatory.
Oh my goodness!
It had gone off the scale in the conservatory, actually.
Oh my goodness me! Yeah. What about in Oxford, Rebecca? I mean, did the heat hit you a lot there?
Yes, it did. But I think what I've been feeling so far this year is bring it on, because there's been so little warmth. And then this week suddenly it was beginning to get warmer, and then Friday it was a bit overwhelming. But I kind of need 3 or 4 more days of that sort of temperature before I start to think, please, can we have what used to pass for normal? Because I do love heat, and I kind of feel that. I don't know. I feel like I've been kind of having to keep myself warm with my clothes for too long.
It's such a fascinating thing to discuss, because for me yesterday, for example, I was, and for a lot of people, it's heat makes me suffer quite a fair bit, and my hay fever gets absolutely terrible, and my body just shuts down. I get too fatigued, and I can't no matter what I try and do. And because the heat continued to build up yesterday, it continued to build up into the evening as well, which was incredible. Like, by the time that it started to cool down outside, it got up to 27 degrees Celsius in the house, and this house is usually pretty good at keeping itself cool. And I suppose we're segueing into a part of what we're going to talk about next. But and I'm really, really nervous that I'm 40 years of age this year, and already I'm starting to suffer in heat that's north of 30 degrees Celsius. And of course, with what we know is going to come, it's quite scary and frightening to think how much more uncomfortable that is going to become. And I'm not yet in the most vulnerable of age groups. So I guess that leads on to exactly one of the things we're talking about. And so just a little bit of context for everybody. So you've heard, especially Caroline, talk about the University of East Anglia, and Rebecca's helping out as well. And that is to do with the UEA's Climate of Change program, which is absolutely fantastic. I'll put a link in the description. It's all about not just informing people about climate change and the climate science and things like that, but like taking action, having agency, feeling empowered about doing something about it. And one of the things that they're doing is to try and address eco-anxiety, climate anxiety. And both you folks have been involved in that, which has been absolutely amazing. So we're just going to say hi to Freddie Reynolds at the University of East Anglia, who got us in touch. So hi, Freddie, my colleague from UEA. And yeah, eco-anxiety. So Caroline, let's start with you first. What do you take to be eco-anxiety, climate anxiety, and how does it manifest in you? How does it feel for you?
The project came about because there were a lot of people, or increasing numbers of people, coming to Norfolk and Waveney Mines, who I work for, with climate anxiety, where they're very concerned about the future, concerned maybe not to have, feeling very anxious, asking for counselling, being confused about what to do, or feeling unable to do things, or feeling very guilty about not being able to do enough, maybe, and maybe not wanting to have children because thinking there's no future for them. So that's partly where this course has come from. Also, there at the university, there's, for example, there is a lot of information about what is going to happen, and it's a natural reaction to feel anxious and nervous about this, and have all sorts of feelings. But there wasn't any necessarily for young people. There wasn't anywhere for them to go for support, or to discuss that with each other, or to what to do with those feelings, I guess. So that's where this project has come from. So it's been, for me, I have I was previously, I suppose, a campaigner on climate change quite a few years ago when I worked for Women's Environmental Network, and then I gradually and it felt like nobody was doing anything at that time apart from us, maybe, but now I'm glad that people are talking about it, but it doesn't feel like we're doing enough necessarily. But this is, this is what we're offering, is a chance to discuss that in a supportive way, what your feelings are, and we're offering these climate cafes that are based on the death model of Death Cafe, where it can be quite taboo to talk about feelings of grief after death, and there were these cafes which set up for that. So this climate cafes are to talk about this inconvenient truth. It's going on, and how we can feel and how we can deal with those emotions, acknowledge them, say, yeah, actually it's a natural reaction, and get support from each other, and not necessarily say this is what you have to do now, because I think there's already a lot of information and organisations that are giving action that we can be doing, but just saying, actually, let's not judge each other. Let's talk about it and talk about our feelings anyway. So I don't know if that answers your question.
That's incredible. I mean, two things come to mind as you were speaking there. One was the fact that I feel anyway, as someone who has been open about their mental health issues. I'm on medication for depression. I suffer very strong bouts of gender dysphoria, so I talk about that quite a lot. And one of the reasons why I feel able to do that is because I definitely feel that, especially over the last decade or so, that the stigma around mental health has not gone away completely, but it's not as bad as it used to be. Now, do you think that people, from your point of view anyway, that you're able to have these conversations, you're able to, take the death cafe model to a extent and apply it to because have you seen less stigma around mental health nowadays, Caroline?
I guess so. I suppose that's it. We are looking for less stigma around mental health, and saying this isn't a mental health issue necessarily, or it's not an individual's issue. It's that we're trying to destigmatize that. But I suppose people are talking more about mental health in general than maybe when I was younger, I guess. So yeah, I think we are more able to talk about. I suppose when I was a teenager, people have come to me and said, when I was a teenager, we didn't have anything like that. We didn't have that support, or we didn't talk about our mental health, and it would have been useful or whatever. So there were some who were saying, yeah, it was. Some of them were saying, nuclear war was one of the things we were, the young
That's
people.
Right. I remember that. Yep.
Yeah, and saying that actually, really, my sister-in-law was saying, she didn't want to tell anybody because she thought they wouldn't take her seriously, but she was really seriously anxious about nuclear war, that kind of thing. So I suppose, yeah, it is. It's something for us, especially young people, and it's been great working with the university, with students from the university, who are so articulate and aware, and some are working in the climate change, or international development, and aware of climate injustice and all this kind of thing. But actually, also, they didn't have anywhere to go with those feelings necessarily, and there was a sort of a silence around. It's you just get on with that academic world and somehow just keep going, and it's almost not talked about really. Maybe, I don't know.
They call it climate silence, don't they? Yeah. Well, it's complicated, isn't it? Because if we say climate distress or climate anxiety or eco anxiety is a natural response, it sounds like we're saying we don't think it's important, or we don't think we're not interested in people's suffering, and people are really suffering with these feelings. But what we mean by that is that it's a lot of the individual reaction comes from what you might call the system around us. So, and I don't know, but I wonder if there are parallels with gender dysphoria. We grow up in a society which assumes a kind of binary setup of there's women and there's men and there's little girls and there's little boys and there's puppy dogs' tails and all things nice and some you have to be one or the other, and that is extraordinarily pressurizing and difficult for many people. And similarly, we're all in a society now which is kind of saying, don't worry, nothing's the matter, everything can carry on as normal, and it doesn't matter that no action is being taken. It is not a problem, and that makes people feel that somehow the problem is them. And that's incredibly painful, I think. And it's for the kind of psychology I work within, which is partly eco-psychotherapy, but also kind of psychoanalytically informed, says, well, actually, what's going on there a lot of the time is collectively we can't quite bear to think about this stuff, and so we locate all the distress in other people, in people who've got a clearer concern for the climate. And so we kind of say, oh, there's something, you're really worried about this, aren't you? And I'm sorry you feel so bad about it. And we kind of assume that it's that individual's issue, when in fact it's a collective one, but it's being largely denied. And it is not about climate denial in the traditional sense. It's about people can't bear it, and so they try not to think about it, and they say it's the problem of the person who is acknowledging it.
I find it it's fascinating what you said, Rebecca, about when you said, I don't know, Kit, when your experience with gender dysphoria, how similar or how different that I never really thought about it in that way before, to be honest. I suffer from climate anxiety, eco-anxiety. Yes, but I am exceptionally good at dealing with it. But I don't know exactly why. I don't know if it's because I am very knowledgeable about climatology and I've got a very deep understanding of how it all works, and I'm very attuned to, you mentioned about like the system and like what we can do, but also what we as individuals can't do. I'm at peace with that. I'm very active. I'm a climate activist. I do everything I can. We've got a carbon neutral house. We have solar panels, electric car, and all that kind of stuff. But maybe it's not all that. I do work to empower people through the work that I do, and I do deliver workshops on climate anxiety turning into agency and things like that. And there's one thing I'll talk about in a moment. But I never really thought about it. It really is because I've had this experience of dealing with things like gender dysphoria. Maybe that has equipped me in some way, shape, or form to, I don't know. I'm going to have to reflect on that a little bit more, I think. That's really intriguing
to hear what you think about that, because it's I find myself like I'm about to say something like it's the equivalent of saying I don't have climate anxiety. It's like I don't have gender dysphoria, but I probably do. Even though I might not have been aware of it. And maybe it's the bringing it to the consciousness that you've had to do that helps you to apply it in other contexts. I don't know. I mean, that's for you to say.
I have a lot of, we're obviously we're a very, very queer friendly podcast, and so I know I've got a lot of queer friends, family, people listening. Folks, do tag us on Twitter or something like that. Tell us how you feel, about this. This is really, really intriguing. Good friend Ro Proctor, who works for Youth STEM, they're keen about this kind of stuff. Ro, let us know how you feel about it. Eli Ramos, all these folks. Another person I'd like to have a shout out to as well is an ex-student of mine, is Johanna Bonilla Allard, who I talked to last season for episode 18. And the one that we talked about her climate anxiety, because one of the first things she did to get in contact with me after she had left school a few years afterwards was said, I'm really dealing with this quite badly, and do you have any advice for me? So it really is going on. It really is out there. But that's definitely some food for thought.
There's a thing that I just wanted to go back to as well, which is this connection between anxiety and agency and action that I think people often make, and I think it can be really helpful. And there is also some value sometimes in keeping those things separate. One of the things I find in climate cafes, which we're I think, segueing into, is that if you can say to people, look, we're not actually here to talk about climate action. We're here to focus on you and your feelings, and really try to find words for those feelings, and really try to feel into each other's feelings in the group. And if we can just temporarily put the question of action to one side, it helps reduce. In a strange way, it helps reduce anxiety, because people are less likely to worry about, am I going to be judged because I haven't done this, or I'm deleting meat, or whatever it might be. And then, or indeed, less likely to let their own kind of judgmental feelings come to the surface. And, if you have a vegan in the group and there's somebody who's still eating meat, there can be kind of tensions around that. If you don't say, we're not here to talk about this, we're just here to talk about your feelings, that can be really quite powerful. And then, of course, it's only a temporary space, and you come back to the question of what action do you want to take afterwards, separately. And I think that can be really, really helpful for people.
So I'm going to reassess. Well, I'm going to think about tweaking about the kind of messages that I give, because I do perhaps I do bang the whole anxiety to agency drum too hard, maybe. But the session that I did with the University of East Anglia for their Project Change did include getting to terms with your feelings first. So I worked with another ex-student of mine, Emma Lindsay, who did the body. We called it climate anxiety, mind, body, and soul. So Kate Russell, Dr. Kate Russell, who from the University of East Anglia, she did the whole mind thing, talking about what it is, how to center yourself, coming to terms with anxiety. And then Emma did some embodied movement about kind of things, how to use nature to kind of make powerful movements with your body and get tuned with nature. And then my bit about soul was, now that you've come to terms with your anxiety, if you want to do something, here's the kind of things here's how you go about taking action. So not as you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you should do that, you should give up meat. It's more of a case of assessing where you are, what are your capabilities, what are your desires, what are your capabilities, what are the easy wins, what are the unrealistic things that you can put aside. So if you can bring in one vegetarian meal a week, that's a win. You're not like change your diet completely. Or if you can't take action at home because perhaps home life is not conducive to challenging your parents or your guardians to make changes, shall we say, well, that's probably the nice way to put it. Then are there other things that you could possibly do, like run a discussion conversation group at school? So it's more about assessing the things that you can do rather than worrying about the things that you can't do. It's really, really lovely. And again, it worked really well because it's collaborative, so between myself, Emma and Kate and the UEA.
It sounds great. It sounds great. There was I wanted to mention something that happened in a climate cafe I was doing today, actually.
Oh.
Which was that people were talking about what helps with their climate distress. And we got to one person, and she said, yeah, I'm not sure I want to say what helps, because there are loads of things that used to help that don't help anymore. And they were kind of small actions and just kind of flying the flag, that kind of thing. And she said that those things used to be really helpful for really good coping and helpful in themselves, and in aligning her values with her actions and so on. But she said that now, and this is what's coming up now, I think, in relation to the increased intensity of how people seem to me to be feeling, is a much stronger feeling of helplessness, and a much stronger feeling of, is it worth it? Am I really doing anything worth doing? Now, I'm not saying I agree with that perspective, but it is how she felt. What it made me think of is, if we've continuously relied on those sorts of things, which are very good in themselves, but we haven't allowed space for our feelings, it's going to be much harder as we get to the point where those traditional mechanisms are not not cutting it anymore for us. And so that's where I think the just putting aside actions and focusing on feelings can be really, really helpful.
I think some of the people who've spoken about what things have helped them, when they talked about their anxiety, it manifested itself in different ways, like disordered eating, where yes, I'm going to be vegan, I'm going to not have any plastic, and then on a student budget, not having enough money to buy things and not being able to eat, feeling like you couldn't eat. And so there's all those sort of things. And then that was, that's my own thinking, this is my own problem. But actually it's come from the whole system that we're in, kind of thing, isn't it? And so the thing that would help was sort of acknowledging that, okay, this is climate anxiety, finding things that help yourself. But so we offer a course on mindfulness and active hope, which is based on a book by Chris Johnston and Joanna Macy, and that has techniques for looking after yourself and sustaining yourself in this mess that we're in of the world, kind of thing. And it's I suppose there's a model there of the spiral, where it's a process that you're in. It has been drawn as a sort of dandelion, where you've got the roots, the stem going up, and the flower and the little seeds going around. So you're kind of acknowledging the feelings. And I can't remember all of it is, but Rebecca probably knows. But I was just thinking, when you were saying about the action and thing, that's the going forth. But you're going forth at the end with the seeds going. It could be at this point, what you need for yourself could be just, I need to look after myself and have a break, or make a cup of tea, or look after, whatever it is. Or I might be going out and doing, but finding your thing that nourishes you, that also is part of the whole community. It all connects to each other, what we're all doing.
That community thing is such a key part of it, isn't it? This is that we are not, that for somebody who's struggling with climate distress, often they feel that they've got to hold all the responsibility for themselves. So if they're drinking cow's milk rather than oat milk, or not going to as many demonstrations as they would like, or whatever the things they feel they're failing to do, it's all somehow, it's like it's been privatized onto that individual, which is a bad place to be. And I think the active hope process it's a group process, like climate cafes, and people support each other, feel into each other's feelings, understand that they're not alone. It doesn't get rid of the distress, but it helps people to feel they're not alone with it. Both of those processes do that. And I love the spiral in active hope. And there's a lot of similarities with climate cafes. Essentially, what a climate cafe is doing is part of the active hope process, which is a kind of witnessing your feelings with each other, witnessing your pain. And through that, people learn maybe to see things differently. That's what active hope suggests. Seeing with new eyes, they call it. And then the going forth is, as Caroline says, it's the action stage. And it's, what am I going to do? And it doesn't have to be much. It is taking out the seeing with new eyes into the world.
So, okay, yeah, so I could see it's that kind of daffodil kind of thing going forth, and it's, with folks, when you blow on it and it goes, all the seeds get spread. So it's like that kind of thing, the spreading of the seeds of that daffodil bloom. Yeah.
So we start off with gratitude, because that's or gratitude or appreciation of what we appreciate ourselves in our life. And it's useful to start there, because that's where you're more likely to know about your feelings and get in tune with them, I suppose. And you'll think about the little dog smiling at you, or whatever it is.
And I don't want to spend mega amounts of time on this, but of course, it just goes to show how destructively successful the powers that be, the fossil fuel industries, and their campaign of putting it on us has been. And whether they, I don't know, but whether they knew it was going to cause such a impact on our mental well-being as well, I don't know. Some cynics may say yes, they would have known this would happen. Some people said no, this is an unintended consequence of their actions, but it's all part of the greater system, which is just unsustainable. Because, and I remember it was an independent movie that was made, would it have been about 15 years ago or so now, called The Age of Stupid, which is amazing. And folks, it's still relevant today. It is an incredible movie. I strongly recommend you watch it. And the one cartoon bit that I always used to play in class to the kids was this little skit, and talked about, well, you can't have continually growth in a capitalist society, because continuous growth on a continuous expansion on a never expanding planet is just, and then the analogy was a growing kid on a space hopper just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and the Earth is the space hopper, and eventually the space hopper just goes like that. So yeah, and it's the system that feeds that. And one more thing before we move on as well is that this is why I'm a strong advocate of framing climate change as a school safeguarding issue, because in school statutory guidance with safeguarding, it talks about one of the risk factors for poor mental health in kids is, and it says it in the statutory guidance, disasters, war, or other overwhelming events. Well, if that doesn't sum up climate change, I don't know what is. And so when you've got the robust and unequivocal climate science, plus the fact that we've got studies like, we all got those studies that talk that eco-anxiety, climate anxiety is real, plus the fact that you've got this statutory safeguarding guidance, this means that schools should be acting. And I love what you were saying, both of you. One of the ways that they can do this and create a safe environment for their students and deal with this issue through a safeguarding lens is make sure they've got that sense of community, that sense of belonging, that they're able to talk about it. Perhaps every school should have their own climate cafe. I bet you'd love to see that.
Yeah, and it's that's quite a challenge for teachers, I think, isn't it? There's the whole question of how safeguarding is defined, and the polarization that we're experiencing now around about the levels of acceptance of the climate science. And it seems to me that for teachers, there's a need for them to be able to kind of sit with the distress, because otherwise they'll be constantly trying to shut it down, and that is likely to make things worse. And I think I'd love to hear from both of you about how climate science is taught in schools and what children are kind of left with if there isn't a place for them to share their responses to it. And if that is because teachers are not really in a position to do that, partly because of pressures of curriculum and all the rest of it, but also maybe because of their own stuff, that it's somehow it may not feel acceptable. So what do we do? What do we do about teachers as well as about children?
Yeah, that you nailed it really. Because that is quite a lot of my freelance work, is supporting teachers about how to teach climate change, how to teach the science, getting students and teachers climate literate, as I call it. That's part of my job, and it's amazing. And I feel it's incredible that even though I mostly work with geography teachers, who would have the level of experience, expertise, and knowledge to teach these. Well, I would assume to teach these things quite effectively. But when I run these courses, it's amazing how many of them actually feel very anxious about teaching it, and that they're not doing a good enough job, or it's all doom and gloom. It is so tricky. You're right. And you hit the nail on the head, Rebecca, when you said about the pressures of getting through the curriculum. And one thing that, and the good and the bad thing, it's a double-edged sword, is that climate change as an issue permeates throughout everything. It is an intersectional issue. No matter what you're teaching, if you're teaching natural hazards, then climate change is exacerbating the impacts of natural hazards, and it's causing communities to not able to adapt and become climate resilient. So you can't really teach about natural hazards without teaching climate change. Economic development, well, because of our globalized society where we get things coming in from different parts, climate change having an impact on where things don't grow and whether, and then what about transport infrastructure? So you can't get away from climate change now. And so the teacher is feeling anxious where they're thinking to themselves, well, how am I going to put climate change in throughout the curriculum because I want to, because it's an important issue, without becoming, oh, what lesson are you going to next? Oh, we're going to climate change. I'm still want to teach geography. So it is tough. I don't have all the answers, although I can give advice and expertise, but it's definitely a collective effort amongst the geography teaching community, in particular in the science teacher community, about trying to get this right. But one thing we can't get away from, and one thing I always say, is that we can't get away from the fact and the language that scientists themselves are using. When they are starting to use language like unequivocal, which is very strong and powerful in scientific literature, when they use words like that, then you have to teach the truth. You can't not teach the truth. So how do you do that without instilling anxiety?
Yeah.
It's hard. It is really hard.
I mean, I don't know that you can do it without instilling anxiety. I think there has to, the climate distress is a reaction to reality. It's a reaction to, as we were saying earlier, the inconvenient truth, the difficult truth. And it's like, what I think teachers need is partly it's support for their own climate distress, because geography teachers, seems to me, must have kind of occupational hazard of and to be able to allow children to be distressed, but to hold it, not to push it away, but also not to intensify it or leave children feeling alone with it. And I don't have answers either. I just don't see how we can talk about this at all if we have constantly got to step around anxiety.
Yeah, no, which is why the work that you both are doing is so important, and you're right, it's something I'm going to reflect on myself a bit more, is making sure we can separate the whole, what do we do, and the anxiety, and okay, let's come to peace with our anxiety first, not get rid of it necessarily, come to peace with it, learn to live with it, a bit like I learned to live with my gender dysphoria, just circling right back to what you said at the very start. Hi folks, a chance for you to recharge your brew, but also a polite prod to remind you that it's so easy to support this podcast. Simply liking, sharing, rating and reviewing means that it will get on more people's radar. Also, there are a few links down in the description which may be of mutual benefit. Please do check them out. Let us transition to, that wasn't a pun. let us transition onto something environmental, but a little bit more feel good. And Caroline and Rebecca, I'd love to get your input on this. So I'm gonna play a little clip of episode where I spoke to the actor Adil Hussain, who said something amazingly profound about his experience with connecting to nature. And this is what Adil said.
So one of the stories I remember, that I was working myself with a jackfruit tree, and I was, after 4 hours of uninterrupted work, which led me to a very deep space of consciousness and solitude and silence and quietude. I don't know how to say it, not very profound, but the experience was so profound. The only thing which came to my mind after 4 hours, that, oh my God, this tree is my greatest grandmother, means not grandmother or grandmother, but the primordial grandmother.
Right.
And who is ready to feed me, and who is ready to allow me to climb, to smell, to feel, to hug, to cut, to chop, to eat the fruits, to make anything I would like So sacrificing, so giving, so an all-embracing grandmother, greatest, as I said, the primordial grandmother, is willing to sacrifice itself for my well-being.
Wow.
That's just, yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
What's your initial reaction? I could see you both beaming. Caroline, how did that make you feel?
Yeah, that was amazing. I was saying that I love trees, and that trees have created our oxygen, and that they keep us warm. They feed us, they can regrow, and the seeds and all this sort of thing. But that was just even more profound, wasn't it? So yeah, it was amazing.
It really was. It made me think of the feelings of being like a little child that I get when I am with trees. That a tree can hold me and support me, and I can lean on it and kind of connect with it. And it's there were a couple of psychological concepts that it reminded me of. The first is a thing called containment, which is about if you have a feeling that it's too much for one person to manage, to bring it into the relationship between you and somebody else can really help it to become manageable. And I think trees can do that for people, as well as other people doing it for people. And the other thing it reminds me of is, of course, one of the things that we struggle with as a species about the climate crisis is that it brings us in touch with the facts of our dependence on the world. And trees, I think, working with trees, being with trees, can remind you of that in a really helpful way. That sense of being like a little child is profoundly important and transformative. That if people can do that, and that idea of the greatest grandmother is like that, kind of writ large in the sky. I love it.
That conversation I had with it just left me speechless. And it only had to come to an end when his wife told him that he had to go, because he was sitting there drinking a Psalm tea. It was delightful. Let's play a little game. Let's see how many we can get right, because I think one way to really demonstrate the point, especially the wonderful point that you've just made, Rebecca, as well, is how we as humans have incorporated trees into our culture and into our language. So tree analogies, tree saying based on trees, right? So if I start with one, let's see how many we can come up between us. So the saying, roots and all, I've dealt with that, roots and all. So to me, I've not just kind of dealt with the issue. I've not just tidied up the living room. Oh, I've done a completely dust. I've done a Hoover. I've done it, roots and all. So there you go. There's one. So can you folks think of any other tree?
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Yep. So
a root and branch review.
Root and branch review.
So doing the background as well as the what we can see.
Yeah, a thorough review. Yeah, looking through the background of things that. Yeah. What else?
There's loads probably, aren't
there? The root of the problem.
Oh yeah.
Getting to the root of the problem, so you're not just you're trying to figure out what's the cause, not just to deal with the symptoms. Yeah. Family tree. Obviously.
Of course.
Yeah.
What about leaves? There must be idioms that relate to leaves.
This must be. Listeners, write in. Send a postcard too. Well, where does the term leaflet come from? I mean, is it coincidental, or is it something to do with leaves? Because did you used to write something on a leaf and pass it around or something? I don't know. Or it's
how interesting. Yeah, the idea that leaves have become part of literacy and the development of language and writing and communication, because of course that is what they do, isn't it?
Right. Okay. Oh, you can't see the wood for the trees, or can't see the forest for the trees. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I can't think of any more. I've run out. I've run dry.
What this is doing for me is I've got in my mind an image of a forest I was in recently, and the forest is the important thing, and I'm struggling to bring it back to idioms. I can tell you about the forest if you like, but that's not the game. So
I thought we'd just have a bit of fun, a bit of a laugh. It's all right. It's all right, Carol. We won't tell everybody that you're looking something up. So it's a podcast no one can see.
You're Googling tree metaphors.
Yeah.
What have you found?
Didn't help very much.
What have you found?
Branches of government you can have.
Branches, and
we did talk about a family tree already, didn't we? But
yeah.
Deep-rooted problems.
Yeah, deep-rooted problems. Yeah.
I suppose I don't know if that's where it comes from, but I'm stumped. When you say I'm stumped speech or something. Yes.
Offshoot.
Yeah.
Going out on a limb.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's a metaphor in itself, isn't it? Because we have limbs as well.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't know why I'm doing this whole dance with my arms, everybody, but if we can't see. Okay. Right. That was quite fun. Okay. So that's pretty good. And if anybody listening, if you think of any more, Twitter hashtag @CoffeeJogPod, tag us in and tell us a little bit more of your tree or plant idioms, please. Okay. Right. Two last things before we finish for the evening then, and that is we're going to spill the beans. Well, I sometimes say quirky about yourselves, but it's not really quirky. It's just something about you that people might not know. But Carol, I'm going to start with you first. So apparently you have a love for knitting.
Well, I got into it in lockdown actually. Well, I'm no lie. I used to knit when I was 18. I was knitting because I remember knitting in an airport on the way to Germany, and I was asked what was I doing there, and I said I was knitting, out in German. I was in the wrong waiting room, I think, and I was just knitting, and they said, "Was machen Sie da?" And I said, "Stricken." Knitting. This, but then I didn't do any for a long time until lockdown, and I thought I was in a craft. That's right, I was in a well-being thing where it was art and craft, and somebody else was knitting. I thought, why don't I try that again? So I relearned it. Yeah, so I'm not as if I'm amazing or anything, but yeah, it was quite nice to sort of knit something, a scarf or something like that.
My wife's taken up crocheting actually, and we have crocheted mostly Studio Ghibli characters like Totoro's and No Face and things like that. This is an anime series because my kids love it. But this is, I'm showing on the camera, this is a crocheted Homer Simpson from an ex-student of mine. It was a present that she gave to me saying thanks for being my teacher. So crochet knitting.
That is really nice. Sweet.
I know. Oh. So your Spill the Beans, Rebecca, it's like TV box sets, especially ones that showcase horrible, glamorous people, like Succession. Tell us.
Succession, yeah. I do. It's an absolute fantastic guilty pleasure. I also enjoyed The Night Manager. The one with Hugh Laurie, and they were all very glamorous, and they were in these beautiful settings and things, and it's just absolute escapism. But the one I'm watching at the moment is the Lazarus Project, which is about the end of the world and finding ways to prevent the end of the world through time travel. And that's escapism too. It's like, oh yes, this is talking about the bad things that are happening in the world, but it's okay because we can just go back in time and fix it.
Yeah. I'm a Star Trek and fantasy nerd, so I definitely feel comfort, like especially Star Trek, which is like a constant commentary on current affairs and current issues, and like it just hit the nail on the head. So I've done previous chats about Star Trek. I'm not going to go on for it again. Great, thanks for sharing that little tidbit about you both. Okay, final thing in. Let's link you to wonderful people to the previous Coffee and Geography podcast guest, which was Alexis Barnes. So Alexis Barnes is someone who was raised by wolves. Yeah, she was, right? And if you're going, what, Kit? What? That's amazing. Go and listen to the previous episode. But when we did the We Are All Geographers to link, using a word to link our guests together, she would like you two to talk about the word commitment. So commitment. So the trick is because there's two of you, I'm going to give you 20 seconds each to just talk about the word commitment. It could be the first thing that comes to your mind. It could be something related to what we've chatted about today. It could be anything you like. What does the word commitment mean to you? And then once you two have done that, you're going to come up with a word for next week's guest. So the question really is who would like to go first?
I've got a connection with commitment.
So when you're ready, Rebecca, I will start the timer. And then at 20 seconds, Caroline will take over.
Okay, so my connection with the word commitment is the film The Commitment, so the book by Roddy Doyle. So what that's about, of course, is this very specific place. It's about those working class kids growing up in Ireland and finding a way to express themselves and maybe kind of come out of their background through music of a kind which was also about helping people to escape from oppression and difficult.
Okay, we're switching to Caroline.
My link to commitment is that I will do what I promise to do. So I commit myself to things, and that can sometimes tie me up in knots and may make me seem a bit cautious to begin with when people ask me about things. And I do like to make sure that I have got that ability, or that I will, when I say I'm going to do something, I will do it. So I do commit myself, although,
time's up. Yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah. Oh, thank you both. Thank you for that little thing there. Right. So for next week's guests, then, I'd like you two to come up with a single word that they will do the same thing. They will riff for, usually it's for 30 seconds. So let's have a little bit of a brainstorm. What do we think? Is it going to be something related to our chat?
I've got this postcard on my desk in front of me, and it's a sculpture by Anthony Gormley. And can you see? I've turned my view off, so I can't see whether I've got it in the right place.
Yep, we can see.
It's a baby. It's called Iron Baby, and so the word baby came to mind as a thing to offer to the next guest.
Baby. Caroline, do you concur? Should we go with baby?
Yeah, I like that. I like the child pose, isn't it? It's child pose.
The yoga child pose.
It was a very protective and restful pose, almost.
Yeah.
So I don't mind if it's.
We'll go with baby. We actually I think did we have yoga before as a word? I can't remember now. I've done so many of these things. Right. So the word is baby. Well. Oh, what a lovely chat. Okay, so last thing for us to do is say any shout outs you want to say hi to. So I guess we'll say again hi to Freddie Reynolds and the climate and people and culture team at the University of East Anglia, who do a fantastic job keeping all this stuff going and logistics and motivating all that lot. So hi Freddie, hi team. I'll see you in the office soon. Caroline, would you like to say hi to anybody?
I'll say hi to all the students who are coming to the Climate Cafe that's going to be happening on the 6th of July.
6th of July, everybody. 6th of July. Yep, if you're at the UEA, come to the Climate Cafe.
Co-facilitating there with me. So, 3:30 on 6th. So, it'd be great to see anybody.
Rebecca?
I would like to have a shout out to Ruth Taylor, Caroline's colleague at Norfolk and Waveney Mind, who was the originator and motivator and inspiration behind this project.
So, I
did think of saying that as well, but I thought I'd better do this plug.
And Ruth, thank you so much for putting me in contact with these two wonderful people. It's been absolutely wonderful getting to know them, and I hope I get to see see you both in the flesh soon. Caroline, probably sooner rather than later, and that'd be absolutely amazing. And I believe you both have a Twitter handle, so if anybody wants to connect with what you're doing, let's just see if I remember this. So Rebecca, you are at Rebecca Climate, is that right?
I am, and there's also at Climate Psychol, which is
Climate
Psychology Alliance.
Wonderful. And for you, Caroline, I guess it's the Norfolk and Waveney Mind. So I think that was at Norfolk Mind, I believe.
I think so, yeah. And then there's at Kaz Fernandes is my one.
At Kaz Fernandez. Wonderful. Thank you so much for a wonderful, deep, insightful, but also fun conversation, both. I've really enjoyed this evening. And as I say, I hope to get to see you soon.
Thank you, Kit. It's been really enjoyable.
Thank you, Kit.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you had fun. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe so more stories and experiences can drop into your favourite podcast app. If you fancy being a guest or have any feedback, follow us on Twitter at CoffeeJogPod and send us a DM. Or you could email coffeeandjog@geogramblings.com. Until next time, keep geogging.